Hi guys, welcome back to Theater Arts 122. I've been enjoying a lot of your discussion board postings and a lot of the essay questions as well. Just a slight critical remark that some of the essay questions towards the end have sort of dropped off and gotten a little bit more brief, and sometimes in their brevity I think have lost the essence that you're trying to relate in answering the question that is being asked specifically. So just sort of stay on top of keeping your responses, to a minimum of at least a few sentences so that you can answer the question that's being asked. So I wanted to talk a little bit about theatricalism versus realism, and I figured what better way to talk about immediacy in reality than to bring this thing into camera with me. This is Elliot. They say there's nothing worse as an actor than being on stage with a dog or a baby. Because the dog or the baby will get all of the focus immediately, which is probably happening right now. I'm sure you guys are all looking at Elliot and not at me. And that's because there's really nothing more realistic in terms of absolute realism than what a baby does. He's not thinking at all about how you're looking at him right now, or what the end result of what he's doing is, what his paradigm or matrix is. He's just being, he's just existing. And I think that the essence of what all playwrights and what all directors and everyone who works in the theater or in any art form is looking to do is truthfulness, is the human experience.
Stop it, Josie! Stop it! Stop it right now! Stop it! You're ruining my life! Stop it!
And whether we're talking about Bertolt Brecht's theater and the sort of didacticism of the epic theater and how they used theatrical distance in order to get the ideas conveyed to the audience in a way that was not in any way confused by the emotionality of the narrative, or whether we're talking about absurdism, in which, really the whole idea of a finite, specific meaning based in language was completely abandoned as totally inane. Or if we're talking about Wilson's total theater or the German expressionists, it's just the convention that changes. If you think of theater as like going to the optometrist when they put that big machine in front of your face, and the optometrist puts different lenses down in front of your eyes, and he says, better like this or like this or like this. Well, each one of those lenses changes the way that you see reality, and it might bring it more into focus or less into focus for you. Well, all of these different methodologies, all these different ways of either creating theater or reassigning the meaning of that theater through the way that it's directed, are all really just putting different lenses in front of the proscenium. And while some of these more expressionistic forms move away from proscenium theater and begin to change the relationship of the audience and the stage by moving that relationship physically around in the theatrical space, there is always the idea of this fourth wall, of this wall that the audience is looking through to see this reality that's being created. And these different forms, these different styles, are just changing the lens through which the audience looks. But I think that in the end, they're all looking to do basically the same thing. A lot of you commented on the question and the essay about film, that film was more realistic than the stage. And I think that that's interesting. I mean, I agree in an aesthetic sort of sense that it is kind of more realistic than the stage. But if you really think about it, the sort of montage that they create by taking multiple takes from multiple different angles and then cutting those all together is not at all what reality really looks like. I mean, when you're having a conversation with someone, you don't see their face and then a view from over their shoulder at your face when you're speaking. That's not what happens at all. You just see them sort of dead on. So it's not point of view, perspective, reality at all. It's actually highly conventional. And I think that a lot of people have the experience when they're in a situation that is totally overwhelming, like an earthquake or a firefight, that they're shocked that the actual reality of one of these high-pressure situations is nothing like the way it's represented in movies, because film actually doesn't create reality the way reality exists. Film is highly conventionalized. It actually has as much convention as does, for example, expressionism or the epic theater, or some of the non-Western types of theater that we've been looking at in this class. It's just that the conventions are very accepted by us. Our suspension of disbelief is very willing in the theater. We immediately break down those different images and fill in what's missing in between those two shots to create a third shot in our minds. But that's just as conventional as an abstract movement in order to show the audience an emotion. So in the end, I think all art involves some sense of convention, some sense of lens being put down in front of the hole through which you're watching the theatrical event take place. And depending on who's creating that hole, who's creating that lens, the means by which you experience the essence of being human in whatever is happening during the time period in which that art is being created will change. It will rely less on language. It will break down language into forms that seem absurd, but in fact are attempting to create a more holistic view of the human experience. Or it will use abstract visual forms, or it will create epic, huge, enormous spectacle in order to get meaning across. But there still is the psychology of being a human being, what underlies everything, is always there, and that's why the Stanislavski method of acting has been so consistent. Why we can always go back to this indirect method, because it really works for any particular convention, any different lens that you might be looking through. Sorry, guys. Elliot had to go engage in his favorite theatrical form, which is called napism. But we're back, and this is Josie, who's also rather present and immediate, maybe slightly less so than Elliot, working with a different set of conventions, which convey her reality. Right, Jose? Yeah. How do you show how you're feeling right now? Let me see. Yeah, there you go. Puts Meow's tail in her mouth and makes a squawking sound. There you go. Different means of ideas and symbols, semiotics, which represent reality in a certain way for her. So to sum up, we're really just changing the lens. That theatricalism is just another way of saying realism with a slightly different lens. And even within a particular form, as the essay question that asked the difference between Bringing to Noise, Bringing to Funk, and My Fair Lady suggests, even within a particular form, the sets of conventions, the way in which reality is expressed can differ widely. I mean, be incredibly different. So if you feel like Stephanie that Ibsen would still be writing about the patriarchy because we still live in a patriarchy, or as many of you suggested, that Ibsen would be writing about Proposition 8, which I think is really spot on and a really interesting idea. The bottom line is that Ibsen was working, and the realists were working with a given set of conventions, as are absurdists, expressionists. They're all working just with different conventions, and that all of these conventions really, in the end, represent a different style, a different way of presenting reality to the audience. And style just is basically composed of a list of rules that we have to abide by in order to remain in that style. What? What happened?
The student turned out to be just black.
Oh, the students turned out to be just black? The screen went black, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're back, though, huh? A style is just a change in the rules of the game that you have to abide by while you're living in the reality that's being presented on the stage. And this is the reason why, for me at least, the indirect cycle method of Stanislavski works actually for all theatrical forms. And even though, Meyerhold had originally left the mat to go find a new methodology for acting that addressed some of the German expressionism that was beginning to find its way onto the Russian stage, in the end, I think, especially by the end of his career, what Stanislavski found is that through action the psychotechnique works for any particular form.